Good evening, everybody. I think what I was going to do, I talked through with Mel before, is just show a couple of items of interest before I start the presentation. And in fact, Mel introduced that I was going to talk about Nantiarian, and I'm definitely going to try to do that as much as I can, as it's just one part of a bigger talk. But I'm going to start off by showing you this. Everybody see this? Well, this is actually the mineral vein, a lump of the mineral vein from near the engine shaft at Nantarean. And it's a galena vein. It's solid galena, except you see there's two ribs of shiny silver gray metallic sulfide here. And in fact, the Nantiarian ore was quite silver rich. So this is a form we call steel gray ore as known in the 18th century and before because it was silver rich. But in the middle of this, you can see a quartz vein. And I don't know if you can see a brassy yellow mineral in there. And that's chalcopyrite, which is the copper ore. And this is, of course, quite important because all of these sites where we found really ancient mining all have this association with copper ores with the lead ores. And it was the secondary or the oxidized portion of these copper veins that the early miners were interested in. So this is this is one of my favorite specimens, in fact. And the other thing I was going to show you is one of the stone tools, because I'm going to show you pictures of them, but this is an actual stone tool. Can everybody see this?
Yes.
Yeah. So this is a beach pebble, which has been taken sort of 10 miles inland, and it was used 4,000 years ago in the mine at Tuthermoyne. Tuthermoyne is near Darren. I don't know if any of you know the area around Aberystwyth very well, Plynlemon. The reason this is of interest because I'm going to be talking about the Grange area of Nantiarian in the context of Lewis Morris, and Lewis Morris's miners discovered this mine with these stone tools in, and this is one of them. So this is an early Bronze Age hammerstone with notches for a handle around the middle, and it's been used at both ends as a crushing tool and as a mining tool. Finally, the last exhibit, if you like, is this here. Can everybody see this? So it's this is a reconstructed stone mining hammer as they might have used, we believe, the way they used in the early Bronze Age. So the handle is made of hazel, which is it is bent here. It's bruised and twisted around the stone, and then it's attached with rawhide. And there are examples of this we've found that have been found in the Atacama Desert in Chile. And so we have an idea of these sorts of prehistoric mining hammers. Um, so basically, they were swung underarm like this against the rock for after fire setting, after breaking up the rock. So these are the three exhibits. And okay, so what I'll do is I'll open the presentation. So as Mel said, we've been working the Early Minds Research Group. We've been working in West Wales and elsewhere in Britain for 30 years now. I mean, there's the sort of fairly unique thing about it is that we're all the same with the same members as we were when we started. So we've all grown old together. Um, Okay, so what I'm going to do is basically the talk I'm going to do in three parts. The first part, I'm going to be talking about Bronze Age mining and our researches into Bronze Age mining in Wales, West Wales. Then I'm going to be talking about Iron Age and Roman mining, and finally, there's the end of the talk. I'm going to be saying something about Lewis Morris, who was a Crown mineral agent, um, who was involved with opening mines in the 18th century at a time when there was still much common land. And so I'm going to try to refer that to the area that you're interested in particularly to Nanty Arian and some of the other sites close, either within or just without the Grange in the Melinda Valley. So I'm going to start off just with an introduction. This is sort of really a summary of the sites of early Bronze Age mining in Britain. And so when we first made the first discoveries back in the end of the 1980s, we nothing was known, so it was fairly unique. So the Great Orme and the was found separately, but we started working West Wales, and then over 30 years we've excavated more than 16 mines. So in terms of the exploitation at the beginning 4,000 years ago, the sites in Britain show a really sort of westerly distribution, um, and 80% of coastal sites. In terms of the sort of the chronology of the first earliest exploitation of copper, um, the earliest exploitation was is what has been that we know of was at Ross Island in Killarney. And so there's a Southwest Island group of mines, which you see here. And from the evidence of the dating and other, uh, you know, other aspects of the archaeology, we're so pretty certain that mining moved from Southwest Island to the west coast of Britain, and particularly to West Wales. So the earliest mines on mainland Britain in central Wales, which is the area I'm going to talk about. But there seems to be, from Bayesian modeling of the dates, um, the movement of prospection and discovery of sites seems to have gone from central Wales to North Wales, and then from there to central England. As such, we have a site on the Isle of Man, which you can see there. Um, we have no copper mining sites in Cornwall, but there is evidence for tin exploitation, and none from Scotland, none from Snowdonia, and none from the Lake District so far. We can say that more than 50% of these sites we've located, most of which we excavated, we think are probably prospection sites, or at least very small scale mining sites. The mines are typically trench mines, so they're open cuts. Some of them have been worked as a series of interconnected pits and as various undefined outcrop workings. Almost all of them seem to have been working oxidized copper ores. So these are the sulfides which have weathered at surface, and the oxidized copper ores are easy to smelt. And this is quite an important thing: is that in Britain we don't find the use of sulfide ores, the primary sulfides, well into until the Roman period. Um, so there's no evidence of smelting at any of these sites. There's one smelting site on the Great Orme, but that is in fact a late Bronze Age date for that, and um, it's a tiny bit of evidence really. So generally, the picture is the smelting doesn't seem to have happened at the mines. Just this is what we call a Bayesian modeling of more than 100 radiocarbon dates from the various different sites. This doesn't have all of them, but it just goes to show where West Wales, and here I have Copper Hill being the example of the West Wales mine, starting earlier than the others. Um, this sort of modeling, the dates have been modeled um, from just not from the calibration, but using the archaeological evidence and using this as a sort of an algorithm to try to look at a tighter probability of the start and end dates for mining. So what we think is that mining in West Wales started at the very end of the third millennium BC. Um, okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit. In fact, the main detailed study we have is of the mine on Copper Hill. So it's a study of an early Bronze Age mine. So I think many of you would have visited the Cumbernauld Valley and be aware of the mines there. And the easternmost part of the mine set is mining works on a hill called Copper Hill. And this is the only place, sorry, there's is one of two places at Cumbernauld where we find the prehistoric mining, and this prehistoric mining is only associated where the copper lode, the richest copper mineralization has outcropped at surface and has been deeply weathered and is easily accessible. And there are we've now found another mine, but both these mines on Cumbernauld are located on the Comet Lode. And the Comet Lode is the only one that carries appreciable amounts of copper. So this is the Comet Lode open cast on Copper Hill. You see at the top, 5,000 tons of spoils removed during the early Bronze Age over a 500-year period. The waste tips here are heavily overgrown. Uh, we've sampled them in many places, and we've sampled the interior of the mine, and the rock seems to have been worked by fire setting, and there's evidence here of thousands of stone tools or broken stone tools. In the late, sorry, the very end of the 1980s, 1989 and early 90s, we carried out an excavation with the interior of the main open work, which you saw in the background of the previous slide. And 2.5 meters down, we found this amazing little gallery going in, and this gallery, this is going into the side of the lode. So they were actually trying to work through from the main load to try to find another. So what we call this is like a crosscut, trying to find another load behind it. But I think the important thing here is you see the evidence, all the stone tool working, this beautiful sort of evidence of pounding where these arches, and these are very typical of fire setting, where you get the weakening of the rock through firing having intense fires against the surface of the rock to weaken it, to open up the cracks, which are partly opened by the water that's in the rock and is breaking it open, and then work with stone tools. You see the scale here is that's half a meter. So this is sort of about 2 meter diameter gallery going in. You can't really call it a mine adit or a level. It's just a cave-like work with stone tools. We later got opened up a much bigger area in the center of the trench mine. And this revealed an interesting landscape where you could see they worked down on different ledges, and you can see here two ledges which working on a complex of what we call a stockwork of uh, interdigitating uh, mineral veins, which we know are carrying both lead ore and copper ore. And in this area of the open trench, we're really very weathered, and it's very oxidized, very iron rich, and there would have been a lot of oxidized copper minerals there which have been taken out. We can also see in the background here the infill of the mine, and we worked down to a depth of about 8 meters. with in places after this we had scaffolding, but you can see we worked on a um, step sections, and these are going down through peats, and the basal peats reflect flooding of the mine at the end of the early Bronze Age, during the Middle Bronze Age, and subsequent infill of this trench over the next 2,000 years. Um, so it's quite an incredible environmental record, and we can see the section here. And what we do know is they were still working it after they had flooding problems, is that we have evidence of them working at the top and dropping down timbers into the flooded bottoms, which they never properly drained when they started to have water problems. This gives you an idea of some of those Bronze Age peat layers in the infill of the open cast, and it's just wonderful preservation here. You can still see the autumn colours on the leaves. We have beetle evidence, pollen evidence. So we can reconstruct a really sort of comprehensive picture of the environment at the time the mining was taking place, and subsequently the abandonment of the mine, and then the infilling. So basically, this became a sink for as a complete paleoenvironmental record of the landscape from the early Bronze Age, which is preserved in the abandoned mine. So it was a very valuable resource we had to be able to record this history of the mining and post-mining. When we got down to the entrance area, it's entrance cutting of the mine, where one of those I showed you the internal landscape of the open cut. We had these different levels of rock ledges, and at the front of the open cast there was a trench which they'd cut, and in the trench it was a working area, and there was lots of evidence of fire setting, of crushing of mineral, but it was also very waterlogged. And we've got, this wonderful preservation. This is a red deer, an antler pick for working the rock. And you can see this would have been the end of the pick here, which is worn down from use against quartz veined rocks. But the preservation of the organic material in this mining horizon was incredible. Here we can see the remains of one of the handles. So this is here, that's a reconstructed mining hammer there. And this would have been the twisted hazel, like I showed you earlier. Um, and obviously the hammer, these haftings we know broke, and it had been dropped uh, into the floor, the working floor of the mine, and miners were stepping over it and dropping more stuff on it. So this is half a broken handle, which is preserved exactly as we found it. And when we excavated the other side of Brenda's hand here, we found the other half of it. So it had broken, and they just dropped it in situ, and then it got buried underneath subsequent mining debris. So, this environment from this mine is absolutely unique. This sort of level of preservation has never been found um, in Britain. This is the remains of a creel type basket, and that's probably a reconstruction you can see in the top right hand corner. So this basket presumably broke, and it was thrown down against where they had a fire, presumably a fire set. So because it broke, they just threw it into the where they had prepared a fire, and so half the basket has been burnt away. But fortunately for us, this was actually in a wet patch, and it's just survived. So again, it's made of hazel, and it's a creel type basket. Sorry. Here's some more examples of hazel rope, um, uh, knots for various uh, basketry, and on the right hand side you can see Brenda working, and just see this wealth of organic material on the working floor. This was the working entrance I was referring to. They've cut a channel, and the channel was used as a working entrance, but also a channel to take water out of the working area to help drain it. But the most amazing find was this wooden launder, which is a split 5 meter long section of alder, which they obviously selected, and they worked while it was green, hollowing it out with we've got the evidence of wooden wedges and flat axes used as tools. This is 4,000 years ago, remember? And this log, I mean, was used as a drain, we think, to carry water. We removed half of it here, and this is the second half still in situ. And it basically was taking water the length of the entrance cutting from where we think water was entering the workings. That gives you the date. So it's sort of end third millennium, beginning second millennium date. This is an example of this is our reconstruction of how it might have been used. We know that this was just one of several launders because we found these other launders had been dumped, as I mentioned before, when it began to flood and the mine was being abandoned. They threw some of these wooden logs down into the bottom of the deepest part of the mine working. But we believe that they were trying to tap water from springs flowing into the open cast from one side of it. But they were also using this water, we think, for washing the ore because we know they were crushing ore in this part of this entrance cutting and separating out the gleaner from some of the copper ores, and it appears to have been washed. So they were clearly there was a double use for this what we call a wooden launder. This shows just a diagram um, of the sort of mineralization that they removed. So when they started at the top of the open cut, they were working oxidized minerals visible at the surface, which would be copper stained, um, uh, probably iron oxides and some copper carbonates. But when so within a couple of hundred years, because we know this was worked over probably about a 400-500 year period, they were working in a zone of what we refer to as a mixed zone of chalcopyrite and partly oxidized chalcopyrite. So this produced a lot more waste because they had to separate out the unoxidized sulfide from stringers of oxidized ores, which they could easily smelt. And in fact, mining stopped. Apart from the flooding, we know that they were actually also encountering at the bottom the primary ore. And at the primary ore, they stopped. And we've seen this in the sides of the working, is that as soon as they encountered the primary sulfides, they stopped, abandoned, and went and looked somewhere else. So we also think that the supergene ores, as well as the carbonates, they could well have been taking out small amounts of copper oxide and also native copper, which might have existed in the supergene zone. And we've actually found specimens which show native copper, and this is in fact one of them here. This is probably a tiny, it's very, very difficult now at the mine to find traces of the original war, you find on the tips a lot of secondary staining because there's an awful lot of copper in the tips, but a lot of it has been absorbed into the iron oxides. But this was an example which we think was actually an example of the ore they were removing. Um, and so this is sort of copper carbonates with cores of cuprite, which is copper oxide, and also copper copper metal. So the fact that we looked at this specimen in thin sections suggests that there certainly was, as well as the carbonates, it could well have been copper and copper oxides. What we do know from looking at the um, mineral grains on the crushing platforms outside the mine is that now when we excavate it, they consist of a lot of small grains of iron oxides. But when we've opened sectioned these iron oxides, they've been shown to have cores of the shiny copper iron sulfide, the chalcopyrite. So they were clearly crushing, they were separating the lead from the ores which had copper in. They were crushing the copper, but the copper ore was probably a mixed ore. So the chalcopyrite grains they were apparently rejecting, and they were taking something else. And this is why we think they were crushing these um, uh, not fully oxidized ores to remove the carbonate or the oxidized fraction, separating it from the remnant sulfides in there. We also in the mine have veins of galena on actually on the Bronze Age working face of the mine. And in the floor here, this is a really nice example of a galena vein with a stone tool jammed into the vein and lumps of galena they've just left either side of it. So they were apparently rejecting rejecting the gleaner. We don't know whether they rejected all the gleaner, but this again supports a contention that's not what they were interested in. Whether they experimented with in smelting the lead, because lead sulfide gleaner is quite easy to smelt. But props, it's not something that was particularly of interest to them. So, what can we say about where this metal is ending up? There's a lot we don't know. We don't know, we don't have evidence of where the metal was where the ore was being smelted. We don't, we only, it's guesswork how much ever came out of here. We know that 5,000 tons of rock was removed from here, but how much of that was useful in metal ore that they could smelt. But what it is useful to do has been useful is to use a technique called uh, lead isotope analysis of both the lead ores and the copper ores that come from the vein. So we can try to sort of fingerprint um, uh, using lead isotope analysis because that's the sort of signature that stays through into the metal. Uh, um, and it's a technique which is used by archaeometallurgists to try to um, provenance metal to the source sites. So in 1988, Roland Needham looked at Copper Hill amongst many other possible sites, and they found some matches with what they call Impley 6, which is a Willoughby's metalwork period of the early Bronze Age dating from 1900 to 1700 BC. And they found some matches with artifacts, bronze axes from that period, particularly in Wessex. there there are other possible sources, so it's not it's just an indication of where some of this metal may have ended up. And this, of course, is the right time for the mining. Between 1900 and 1700 BC is the height of the exploitation of Copper Hill and a lot of these other West Wales mines that we've been looking at. So, in terms of the trace metals, Cumberland and Mid-Wales chalcopyrites have also low but interesting amounts of nickel and arsenic and antimony in them. Um, and so there are um, sorry about that. There are issues. There's no whole ore analysis taking, no proper study has been done yet, and we hope that this work is somebody's going to take this work on. Um, so we could be looking at small scale episodic mining movement and also mixing of metals and ores. And so this is a problem that it is still quite difficult if a lot of these small mines, they're taking ore elsewhere to smelt and mixing it with ores from other mines. Um, so, there are problems, but what we can show is that this is the field which shows the Cumberland and the West Wales mines. This is the England Wales lead isotope field for the Willoughby period, and of course there is a very strong overlap here. So it seems that these West Wales mines are a good contender that we can look into and try to refine to show that they come from here. Um, so there's no evidence of smelting. We still need to know where this happened and how it happened. So production figures are only guesswork for Copper Hill and the other 15 mines. We do have a better idea of rock tonnage removed from Cumberland with over 200 to 500 year period. So the estimate for Copper Hill mine was 5,000 tons of rock, possibly containing 90 tons of chalcopyrite as a primary ore, and from which up to 20 tons of hand-picked secondary copper ores could have been extracted, smelted to produce seven tons plus of metal. We think that the UK early Bronze Age mines produced perhaps just 50 to 80 tons in total. It's less likely, therefore, that this metal traveled far, unlike the Great Orme, where the Great Orme metal has been found in Europe, in in France and beyond, even up as far as southern Scandinavia. But it's important to look at some of the Wessex metal assemblages now, which include prestigious items which at one point might be firmly linked to this source. So looking at models of working, this is a so this is just so it's just a reconstruction of the mining period, the mining 4,000 years ago on Copper Hill. They're using local wood for fire setting, and they're bringing stone tools up from the valley bottom and from the coast. So this is a model a model for possible for prospection. Um, so the miners are moving from the coastal winter pastures, and we know this because they're bringing 70% or more of the hammerstones that we find at the mine sites are beach pebbles. So we think they were possibly bringing they were moving from the coastal pastures into the mountain during summer with their animals for grazing in the mountain pastures. So this is effectively transhumance, which of course in Wales has been you still see exactly in your in when you examine the Grange of Abbeycombe here, and but we think they were going up to the mountain summer pastures. The animals were grazing, so it's a slack time of year, and when the animals were grazing in the mountain pastures, they were clearing vegetation, and the clearing of the vegetation revealed some of these mineral veins. But the vegetation is providing a fuel for fire setting, and then they're processing ore at valley campsites, and then carrying ore back to um, the coastal settlements. And it's the coastal settlements, they're meeting metal workers and perhaps exchanging ore for metal itself. The metal workers might have been smelting there, but we think there's little evidence of smelting at these uh, upland sites. So this here we can see erosion on the so when we look at the distribution of sites where we found stone tools in the Plymouth area, we find this sort of like grouping of sites, and the grouping of sites um, seems to be associated with these east-west valleys draining to the coast, also with the mines on either side of the Dovey estuary here. Um, and so basically we call these prospection areas, and these prospection areas perhaps reflect where people where where there were the grazing lands within in the interior. Um, Here we see the all these sites we've excavated at, and we just have a range here. I've just given you a range of dates, so they extend from the end of the third millennium to about 1700, BC. So, it's a period of about 600 years. Some of this work may have started in the Chalcolithic, but the height of this early Bronze Age activity was between 1900 and 1700 BC. But I think the greatest concentration of which are probably the greatest concentration of these early Bronze Age copper mines in Britain is in this area of central Wales. Most of them on the west side of Plinlimmon, with just a couple of mines in the upper reaches of the River Severn here at Nanta area and Nantyricket, just below the summit of Plinlimmon. Um, but most are on the west side. By amazing serendipity, we were digging at a Roman medieval lead smelting site on the valley floor at Cwmystwyth, and we came across a pit. And on the top of this pit, we found this most amazing gold object, which some of you will have seen reference to, um, maybe even seen it reproduced in books. And we believe this is a Bell Beaker gold disc, which was made. It's a gold foil disc, which was made as an ornament. But it's a sort of classic beaker object. We believe it was found in a burial here. We believe this was a grave. Um, it was certainly the right shape for a grave. It was located right at the base of the mineral vein. The seems to be a quite high probability because of the uniqueness of this find and the association with the mineral vein that it is in some way linked, but of course, it's impossible to prove. Um, the likely date of this is 2500. So the likely date is the end third millennium. Um, so it's early for the dates we have for the mines, but the earliest date we have from the copper from the comet lode open cast is 2100, 2200. So it could in some way be a part of this initiation of the mining there, be linked to the initiation of mining. There's other this is basically a map showing Bronze Age finds within the mining area we're talking about. There seems to be a lot of evidence for in the Plinlimmon area for mobile groups of incomers, deposition of these barb and tang flint arrowheads. So it was hunting areas for um, so there is a beaker presence in the area. And there's obviously the disc there at Cwmystwyth and a halberd found very close by. Um, so I don't want to go into this further, but there is other evidence which are directly linked, and particularly the group of mines here, both over in the upper reaches of the River Severn and the Rydal and Ystwyth valleys with a passageway, seem to be a passageway across the Cambrian mountains here. So there is a bigger landscape picture in which into which the mines fit in. I'm just again, this really highlights that big concentration in West Central Wales of the sites where we've investigated and we have dates for early mining. Just to give you an idea, this is Pantidal mine on the North Dyfi estuary. Um, it's very large, open cut working. We have a date here. Um, Again, it's up to in the sort of 18th, 18th, 20th century. So sort of early second millennium date. We've worked at Nanterre on just below the eastern summit of Plinlimmon into this is an amazing gorge of the the Ira Snowbrook. Uh, and this is the river is actually diverted into the mine working. But this was in the 19th century. They found stone tools here. We've identified 100 meters of workings of traces of early Bronze Age workings. We've been test pitting on this on shallow tips associated with fire setting and stone tools. Here you have some of the stone tools. They quarried some of the because this is on the east of the Plinlimmon. They haven't used any river. They haven't used any beach pebbles here from the coastal pebbles, and they've actually used river pebbles, and they've even quarried there's some examples of quarried hammerstones here. And the stone anvils made out of some of these flat river pebbles. This is Clankenvelin on Borth Bog. It's a Bronze Age. Oh, sorry, we here. So this is on the on the edge of Cors Fochno. We found the workings here. They've been partly flooded so they're buried beneath the edge of the peat has overridden the workings, but we know we've got we found the site with the stone tools, and the tips were actually buried beneath the peat of the bog. This is, of course, is Nanterarian. This is I don't have any pictures. Um, most of my archive has now gone to the National Museum of Wales. But this shows the prehistoric open cast is the plan of it. The two trenches that we dug into the side of this shallow tip. So, so this is the trenches have proved this sort of prehistoric mines bolt to a depth of 1 meter. We think this is a prospection rather than a meist. It's very small. It was clearly a prehistoric prospection and possibly never produced much. But the dates are very clear, associated with fire setting, associated with stone tools. So, yeah, so mining seems to be associated with the metal route from, sorry, I'm trying, I can't see all my notes here. The earliest Bronze Age copper miners may well have been pastoralists prospecting for ores and mining in the summer or autumn months. Stone tools were brought from the coast, whilst wood came from the clearance of new pastures. They are largely seem to be nomadic peoples, largely aceramic, and perhaps on the margins of Bronze Age society elites. The mining was possibly self-taught because I think these were pastoralists, and we have exactly the same utilitarian approach to mining across the world, really. We got the same tools, whether you go to Iran or to Chile. Basically, they're very, very similar sorts of this stone tool technology for mining. Or concentrate may have been traded for metal as part of the exchange economy. Smelting took place elsewhere. We don't know where it was. It appears to be largely invisible to us, which is perhaps because the smelting hearths were extremely small and they were changing the places where they were smelting all the time. They have left little in the way in the archaeological record. Perhaps the role of visiting metal workers. Um, the first phase of mining was uncontrolled and associated with many different sites. There may have been a mixing of coppers, and so this is the problem, as I mentioned before, with using lead isotope provenancing, is that it certainly is helpful because it's giving a hint of this metal from West Wales appearing in Bronze Age metalwork. But the fact that we are looking at it, we're thinking that they are actually mixing coppers and remelting them, uh, as they were mixing in terms of bronze tools. The abandonment of the mines around about 1600 B was associated with flooding and the depletion of many small sources of the oxidized ores, and also the rise of large demand led mining operations such as we find on the Orme. Um, so I'm just going to this you may well have seen the article we wrote in Archaeology in Wales of on our work at Llanymynech Ogof, which is Llanymynech just north of Welshpool, and Llanymynech is in the Carboniferous limestone. Um, it's often was been referred in the past to being a Roman mine, but we have clearly identified middle to late Iron Age working underground. And it's also bang in the middle of an Iron Age hill fort and has nearby smelting sites actually within and just outside of the hill fort. This is an example. This is a picture of one of the underground passages where we were working. You can see the amount of calcite speleothem covering the walls of the underground working. It's a typical mined passage. Charcoal, we got charcoal from beneath the speleothem. We also have evidence from Llanymynech of not only the early working from the Middle Late Iron Age, particularly the Late Iron Age, but also a reworking during the medieval period, and the dates for that uh, match the dates of the construction of Offa's Dyke, which is of course on the edge of the Hillford. Uh, Returning to West Wales, west of Plynlimmon, this is again a Cwmystwyth, and I mentioned the lead smelting before. This is a Roman first, second century bowl smelting hearth. The bowl smelting hearth is a lead smelting hearth, which was fired by wind. So in fact, they just built a fire and used the wind to fan the flames and tried to create the right environment within it. And this appears to have been a sunken hearth, just beneath the ridge of a ridge which came out into the side of the valley. And it's the wind going over this ridge which fueled this small little stone clay structure with a bowl hearth underneath. And it appears to be very effective because in the next picture we excavated beneath it, and you can see this is number four here is the trench four was where the bowl hearth was, and we identified beneath the turf from from metal detecting traces of lead metal running. So this is beneath in a paleo soil beneath the modern turf, and in the paleo soil is a burnt channel, and in the base of it is the remains of a lead flow. This is 8 meter long channel of lead ran out from the base of whether this was intentional or not. The lead escaped from the hearth and ran down slope. It's quite amazing, really. We've got an example of the lead runnel. So these are long strips of hollow tubes of lead, uh, which they remove most of them, of course, when they after the smelting. But there's traces of the lead still in the buried Paleosoil. So that's first, second century AD, probably end first century. Also, evidence for Roman early medieval mining at Cwmystwyth can be found in the blanket peats, and we've taken cores on the top. And in these cores, we can see evidence of, within the dated peat cores, we can see evidence of pollution peaks of lead, also of copper. But these pollution peaks in the Roman period and also in the medieval period are quite obvious, which basically is suggesting that is confirming that there was lead smelting, quite a lot of lead mining and lead smelting during the Roman period, uh, as well, of course. In the early Bronze Age, we have mining. Basically, the site was abandoned. Then we begin to pick up evidence of mining and smelting again in the Roman period and again in the early medieval period. But we have sort of empirical evidence of this from these paleopollution peaks in the peak cores. This is where the lead smelting hearth is down here. That's a Bronze Age open cast, and these are the peak cores, the site of the peak cores here, and this is what we believe to be a Roman or medieval leat associated with the reuse of the Bronze Age open cast as a hushing tank for hushing on the comet load. There's another closer to Aberystwyth, Penrhyn Coch, and not that far from the western edge of the Abercwmbir Grange is an Iron Age hill fort called Darren. We worked here with Toby Driver of the Royal Commission, um, uh, because we wanted to investigate this open cast working which glances the side of the hill fort and to see whether we could get evidence to show that it was related in some way with the Iron Age hill fort and to see if we could get dating evidence. Very interesting. When we excavated, this is actually the entrance of the hill fort entrance there. But just here in the mine trench, the open cuts, we found the evidence of the original ditch for the bivalate Iron Age hill fort. And in the base of the ditch, we found they'd worked a small section of the vein. So this suggests that they discovered the vein and they certainly tested it during the Iron Age. Some other really interesting evidence which has come out over the last 10 years was, first of all, the excavation by Cambria Archaeology this was about 2015, of a late Iron Age Roman lead smelting site on the edge of Borthbog, Corsfochno, at a place called Ergloth, between Ergloth and Llankenvelin, um, and which has produced obviously lead Iron Age Roman dates from charcoal associated with bowl smelting. Um, Also, a colleague of mine, Johan Lord, fellow director of the Cambria Mines Trust, was um, working, doing some underground survey work in Penpompren mine near Telebont, and found this wooden spade, which he thought was quite interesting because it was similar to the spades found at Darren in the 19th century and since lost. He managed to rescue it, it's been radiocarbon dated, and it's Roman. Uh, so again, this is probably first century AD and coincident with the dates of the nearby forts. So this is the Egloff fort. This is the Roman fort here. This is the late Iron Age Roman lead smelting site. And at Penpompren, we have a Roman mine. So very interesting. The latest finds made by a metal detector just near the Roman fort is of this stamped lead pig, Roman lead pig, which is an ingot um, with the stamp of Domitian, the Emperor Domitian. So, this puts it in the first century, the sort of 70, 80s AD period. Uh, so it's amazing sort of serendipity of finds coming together, really. It's an important site, and Heneb are going to do carried out a geophysical survey, and they found evidence of structures which they think are Roman outside of the Roman fort lead, perhaps associated with the mining and smelting. So that, uh, well, that almost certainly further evidence is going to come from this side. Finally, just to finish off, I was going to say something about Nantiaran in the context of Lewis Morris. And Lewis Morris was a Crown Mineral Agent, and um, he was basically monitoring mining by the private landowners in this area of in the Comat of Purveth, in this area of Ceredigion. Um, from, in the Rheidol and the Aswyth valleys, the Rheidol Valley in particular, north of the Rheidol, in the silver producing area. And he makes some interesting comments on ancient mining. And he also talks about Lewis Morris. Sorry, he also talks about Nantiarian mine prior to the 19th century exploitation there. So this is obviously image that Mel provided me to show the Grange area of Abbey Come Here. So you can just see how it relates to Nantiara and Cumbrino Llwynog and Ponterowyd and Craignant Bach. Basically, this is a map of sort of a larger area, um, showing the mines referred to in some detail by Lewis Morris, and it includes Llwynog. It in fact includes Nantiarian as well. Um, but he's basically uh, referring mostly to mines that are outside um, the immediate area of the Grange, but very close to it. So the mine, the hammerstone I showed you just before I started was from Tullamore, and this is part of the original manuscript text of the Mines of Connell Purveth in 1744, and he refers to he shows a picture in the margin of one of these hammerstones. He says this mine. He says quite a bit about it, but he said this mine seems to have been wrought in the beginning of times when man knew the use of no tools but stones. And he goes to explain about fire setting but it's nice. It's a really nice sort of the mind. He was there as a learned man watching the miners and contemplating as a sort of antiquary and trying to make sense of these remains of early mining that the earliest miners, the evidence of the earliest miners that the 18th century miners had uncovered when they were digging, re-exposing this old work. He also refers to Llwynog mine as an ancient work. He says that Llwynog was a mine discovered by the ancients in the bottom of the river, but was never pursued to the purpose, either to the freehold or one side or the other. So it's interesting. He refers, as he does, to Tullamore as being an ancient mine, but he doesn't say anything more about it. So in 1744, Nantllaran Vein, as Blaen Dyffryn, lay on common land, and it was known as a trial work by poor miners for potter's ore. Of course, potter's ore is the ore that was used for lead glazed pottery. But nothing else is really recorded for Nantllaran. He doesn't mention that, he doesn't mention the clearly we know there was an earlier working there, but he doesn't mention it. So it's perhaps it was in another part of the working and the rest was just grassed over and they didn't look in the old working. Okay, thank you very much. That's a picture of me smelting copper on the Great Orme um, with Alan Williams for Alan's project. So thank you very much.